That's what we're talking about of the smaller states like Mississippi and the identification thing. That'll be good. All right. I hate doing that. Hey, talking with Mr. Ragan Downey here. He's a staff development coordinator and project evaluator here at Pine Belt Mental Health. Also board certified Mississippi law enforcement officer instructor. Trained over thousands of law enforcement officers in many different areas. Just real quick, Mr. Downey has a BA in sociology. He obtained from Mississippi State. He has his master's in administration of justice from USM here, and he's finishing up in May. You said? In May, finishing up a PhD, also here at USM in criminal justice. All right, Mr. Downey, I touched on the basis of my paper here, the information dissemination and identification of illegal contraband being manufactured on state and federal government lands within Mississippi. The question is if there's enough training in the identification and the eradication of these. One of my first questions was for the dissemination of information. I know that the USFS does an interdepartmental newsletter, I believe it's called LEAN, L-I-E-N, where they disseminate information of marijuana sites that they've grown. Do you know of any newsletters like that, or any that crosses agencies?
I'm not aware of any, and again, most of the intra-agency communications, if it's coming down the pipeline from the federal government to the state governments and down to onto county and locals, most of that has to do with fugitive apprehension or terrorism. I'm not aware of anything that has to do with narcotics.
Okay. Do you believe that, we'll save the is there a need question for last, a smaller state, a state the size of Mississippi, and I touch on it in my paper, that you should always mentor or fashion your tactics in a manner of someone who's already implementing who those tactics are working for. Do you think that we can fashion ourselves after places like California or some of these western states, midwestern states, that are doing a pretty good job at fighting the grow sites through identification, eradication, information sharing? Do you think that Mississippi can fashion ourselves after them and be a little bit more effective?
I think it's possible. I think you have to look at two primary factors. Number one, if you're going to follow California's model, if you're going to follow those larger western states' model, do we have similar infrastructure in place to do it? So do we have the similar agencies? Do we have the available personnel? And do we have access to training? And then the second thing I think you would have to look at is a need, obviously. Mississippi is a tremendously rural state with thousands and thousands and thousands of acres of uninhabited land that is not very either accessible to the public or visible to the public. So the potential's there. The potential's there for those growth sites, and I think that you would need to examine, do we have a need for that type of model? But I certainly think it's possible. I mean, we've been doing that for a long time. Law enforcement has, and social services has. We look to other successful models, try to adapt those models to fit our needs, and then proceed. And then, if we're successful, then maybe other states look to our model and look to build upon our model and try to do their own thing. So I certainly think it's possible. Yeah.
Okay. And then we'll just touch on obviously you preluded a little bit there to there obviously being a need in Mississippi for not just like a joint task force that would solely concentrate on the locating, identifying, locating, and eradicating these any illegal contraband on state lands, but the need for the agencies that are already here, again, to share information interdepartmentally from the top to the bottom, and also multi-jurisdictionally across agencies. So if you can, just touch on that, the information dissemination, and the identification. I know we spoke on that a little bit also.
Right.
All the training, you being certified instructor, law enforcement, the I'm sure thousands of hours of training that you've given the police officers, none of that having been on identification, or
right.
marijuana, we can't just assume they know. Just touch on that a little bit.
I think I think the creation or the utilization of some type of statewide task force for eradication, operating in conjunction with the federal government. I actually think that's secondary, and you said something that's very important, and that's the dissemination of information and the training. Task forces cost money, lots of money, whereas information essentially costs nothing. Training costs very little in comparison to actual operation. So you look at the resources we have, and just within the state of Mississippi at the state level, we have the Potency Project at Ole Miss with scientists and chemists up there that work every day with marijuana, that are extremely knowledgeable about that plant, its effects, the various conditions in which it's grown, things like that. And you also have Mississippi State University, which is a school of agriculture, and also has a tremendous presence in the state with its extension services regionally. So, it sounds to me like that we're missing this really, really great opportunity to utilize state resources that are already in existence that could train regionally a variety of law enforcement officers at the state, county, and local level in the identification of marijuana, and also in potentially the eradication of marijuana. With the information sharing, if you had that training up front, again, information, sending it and sharing it costs nothing. Email's free, okay? If you had that training up front and you had the agreement and the infrastructure in place to share that information from the federal government level, if possible, but from the state on down, from the state to the counties, from the counties to the cities, and also between those cities and counties, so not just sharing from top to bottom, but sharing across, right, and also from bottom to top. If you increase that amount of information sharing on potential locations, maybe potential suspects that you have, things like that, using that in conjunction with the training, I think you would be very successful in combating marijuana growing operations in the state. On the issue of methamphetamine, of course, that's a little more specialized model when it comes to not only developing that drug, but also trafficking. Information sharing on that certainly is extremely important, especially due to the amount and the types of specialized chemicals that you have to make crystal methamphetamine. Now, we've done a little bit with trying to regulate drugs like Sudafed or over-the-counter things, and there's also some local store employees have been trained to, if people buy 4 bottles of bleach and 2 rolls of aluminum foil, maybe call somebody. But really, when it comes to law enforcement officer training, and you said this before, everybody kind of assumes that you just know about it. Well, we have the resources in the state to do training on crystal methamphetamine manufacture too. We have a state narcotics department that could certainly offer some, at least basic general concepts and tips to their county and local brothers in the state. But I think the task force that you're talking about should certainly be secondary, just to increased information sharing. If nothing more, bring it up as a topic at a statewide law enforcement convention. I mean, it could be something starting as simple as that, and then
just some type of
training.
Get the ball rolling.
To get the ball rolling and get a fire lit somewhere.
Yeah.
About that type of training. But again, unless enough people and enough of the right people express a need, that they want this and need this, it's probably not going to go anywhere. But it's one of those things, especially with marijuana. the infrastructure's there, everything's there, the knowledge base is there for the training.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of somebody organizing it and determining if there's a need.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think definitely, definitely we've determined there's a need, and I've touched on in my paper a couple times. I've spoken with, I have a couple interviews in there, state level wildlife agents as well as federal level wildlife agents, and neither one of the which have received any training and identification or what to do. There, no policy, no procedure set up on it. I think the need is there. Like you said, it's just a matter of compiling it, implementing it, getting it commenced there. Awesome. Well, that answers a couple of my questions, and I really appreciate your time today.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
You bet.